Book of Heaven, Volume 11. 3 April to 25 May 1915. Page 97 to 102. April 3, 1915. Just as heaven is above the earth with its lights so that man may live, the soul needs the heaven of the divine will. My always adorable Jesus continues to come every now and then, but without changing his look of threats and chastisements. If sometimes he delays, he comes with such a look as to move to pity, tired, exhausted. He attracts me to himself and transforms me into himself, then he enters into me and transforms himself into me. He wants me to kiss his wounds, one by one, to adore them and to offer reparation. Then, after he has made me soothe his most holy humanity, he tells me, my daughter, it is necessary that I come to you every once in a while to take rest in you, to be soothed, to pour myself out. Otherwise I would cause the world to be devoured by fire. And without giving me time to tell him anything, he escapes. Now, this morning, as I was in my usual state, and since he was delaying, I thought to myself, what would have happened to me during these privations of my sweet Jesus, if it wasn't for the holy divine volition? Who would have given me life, strength, help? Oh, holy divine volition, in you I enclose myself, in you I abandon myself, in you I rest. Ah, all run away from me, even suffering, and even that same Jesus who once seemed unable to be without me. You alone do not escape from me, O holy will of God. Please, I beg you, when you see that my weak forces can take no more, reveal to me my sweet Jesus, whom you hide from me, and whom you possess. Oh, holy volition, I adore you, I kiss you, I thank you, but don't be cruel with me. As I was thinking and praying like this, I felt invested by a most pure light. And the holy volition, revealing Jesus to me, told me, my daughter, the soul without my will would have been like the earth without the heavens, stars, sun and moon. The earth in itself is nothing other than precipices, steep heights, waters and darkness. If the earth did not have a heaven above, which shows man the way to recognize the different dangers which the earth contains, man would go toward now falling, now drowning, etc. But there is a heaven above, especially with the sun, which says to man in a mute language, see, I have no eyes, no hands and no feet, but I am the light of your eyes, the action of your hand, and the step of your foot. And when I have to illuminate other regions, I leave you the shining of the stars and the light of the moon to continue my office. Now, as I gave a heaven to man for the good of his nature, to his soul too, which is more noble, I gave the heaven of my will, because the soul too contains precipices and steep heights, which are passions, virtues, tendencies and other things. If the soul moves out from under the heaven of my will, she will do nothing other than fall from sin to sin. Passions will drown her, and the heights of virtues will turn into abysses. Therefore, just as everything would be disordered and infertile on the earth without a heaven, the same happens in the soul without my will. April 24, 1915. The crowning of thorns of Jesus. All the thoughts of the creatures are linked to the mind of Jesus by the divine will. Finding myself in my usual state, I was thinking of how much blessed Jesus suffered in being crowned with thorns. Making himself seen, Jesus told me, my daughter, the pains which I suffered were incomprehensible to the created mind. Much more painfully than by those thorns, my mind was pierced by all the evil thoughts of creatures, in such a way that none of these thoughts could escape me. I felt them all inside me. Not only did I feel the pricks of the thorns, but also the disgust of the sins which those thorns represented. So, I looked at my adorable Jesus and I could see his most holy head being surrounded by spokes of thorns which came through from behind. All the thoughts of the creatures were in Jesus. They went from Jesus to them, and from them into Jesus, remaining almost linked together. The evil thoughts of the creatures with the most holy thoughts of Jesus. Oh, how Jesus suffered! Then he added, my daughter, only the souls who live in my will can give me true reparations and soothe me from thorns so sharp. In fact, since they live in my will, and since my will is everywhere, they find themselves in me and in everyone. They descend into the creatures and rise up to me. They bring me all the reparations. They soothe me. And in the sick minds they turn darkness into light. May 2, 1915. One who lives in the divine will takes possession of the most holy humanity of Jesus, and just like another Jesus, she can present herself before the divinity to plead for her brothers and sisters. My days are more and more bitter. This morning my sweet Jesus came in such a suffering state that it cannot be described. In seeing him so suffering, I would have wanted to relieve him at any cost. Not knowing what to do, I squeezed him to my heart and, approaching his mouth, I tried to suckle part of his interior bitterness. Nothing. No matter how hard I tried to suckle, nothing would come out. I returned to my efforts, but it was all in vain. Jesus was crying. I was crying too in seeing that I could not alleviate his pains in any way. What a cruel torment! Jesus was crying because he wanted to pour out, but his justice prevented him from doing it. I was crying in seeing him cry, and because I could not help him. There are no words to describe these pains. Sobbing, Jesus told me, "My daughter, sin snatched chastisements and wars from my hands. I am forced to allow them, and at the same time I cry and suffer with the creature." I felt like dying for the pain, and Jesus, wanting to distract me, added, "My daughter, don't lose heart. This too is in my will, because only the souls who live in my will can confront my justice. Only those who live in my volition have free access to share in the divine decrees and plead for their brothers. Those who reside in my will possess all the fruits of my humanity, because my humanity had its limits, while my will has no limits. My humanity lived in my will, drowned in it, inside and out. Now, the souls who live in my will are the closest ones to my humanity. Making my humanity their own, because I gave it to them, they can present themselves before the divinity being covered by it, like another me, so as to disarm the divine justice and plead for forgiveness for the perverted creatures. As they live in my will, they live in me, and since I live in everyone, they also live in everyone and for everyone. They live hovering in the air like the sun, while their prayers, acts, reparations and everything they do, are like the rays which descend from them for the good of all. May 18, 1915. The divine justice imposes chastisements, but neither these nor the enemies get close to the souls who live in the divine volition. Continuing in my poor state, I felt my poor nature succumbing. I am in a state of continuous violence. I want to do violence to my adorable Jesus, but he hides so as not to be violated more. Then, when he sees that I am not in the act of doing violence to him because he is hidden, all of a sudden, he makes himself seen and starts crying for all that miserable humanity is suffering and will suffer. Other times, in a touching and almost imploring tone, he tells me, "Daughter, do not use violence on me. My state is already violent in itself because of the grave evils that the creatures suffer and will suffer, but I must give justice its rights." And while he says this, he cries and I cry together with him. Many times it seems that, transforming himself completely into me, he cries through my eyes. All the tragedies, human bodies mutilated, floods of blood, towns destroyed, churches profaned, which Jesus had shown me many years before, pass before my mind. My poor heart is shredded with pain. Now I feel it writhing with the spasm, now freezing. And while I suffer this, I hear the voice of Jesus saying, "How I grieve! How I grieve!" And he bursts into sobs. But who can say everything? Now, as I was in this state, my sweet Jesus, in order to somehow calm my fears and frights, told me, "My daughter, courage. It is true that great will be the tragedy, but know that I will have regard for the souls who leave from my will, and for the places where these souls are. Just as the kings of the earth have their own courts and quarters in which they keep safe in the midst of dangers and among the fiercest enemies, since their strength is such that while the enemies destroy other places, they do not dare to look at that point for fear of being defeated. In the same way, I too, King of Heaven, have my quarters and my courts on earth. These are the souls who live in my volition, in whom I live. and the court of heaven crowds round them. The strength of my will keeps them safe, rendering the bullets cold, and driving back the fiercest enemies. My daughter, why do the blessed themselves remain safe and fully happy even when they see that the creatures suffer and that the earth is in flames? Exactly because they live completely in my will. Know that I put the souls who live completely from my will on earth in the same condition as the blessed. Therefore, live in my will and fear nothing. Even more, in these times of human carnage, not only do I want you to live in my will, but to live also among your brothers, between me and them. You will hold me tightly, sheltered from the offenses that creatures send me. As I give you the gift of my humanity and of all that I suffered, while you keep me sheltered, you will give to your brothers my blood, my wounds, my thorns, my merits for their salvation. May 25, 1915. In the midst of the chastisement of war, there is nobody who thinks of converting and returning to God. As I was in my usual state, my always adorable Jesus barely made himself seen, and told me, "My daughter, the chastisement is great." Yet, people do not stir themselves. Rather, they remain almost indifferent, as if they had to be present at a tragic scene, not a reality. Instead of all coming as one to cry at my feet, imploring mercy and forgiveness, they are, instead, attentive to hear what is happening. Ah, my daughter, how great is human perfidy! Look at how obedient they are to governments. Priests and lay people do not demand anything, they do not refuse sacrifices, and must be ready to give their own lives. Ah, for me only there is no obedience and no sacrifices. And if they do anything at all, it is more pretensions and interests. This, because the government resorts to force. But since I make use of love, this love is disregarded by the creatures. They remain indifferent as if I did not deserve anything from them. As he was saying this, he burst into tears. What a cruel torment to see Jesus crying. Then he continued, "Blood and fire will purify everything and will restore the repentant man. And the more he delays, the more blood will be shed, and the carnage will be such as man has never contemplated." While saying this, he showed the human carnage. What a torment to live in these times! But may the divine volition be always done,